Has your class ever made the teacher cry? What happened? Teacher posted pictures of her old Cocker Spaniel everywhere. Well, eventually it got sick and died. She took a few days off and was devastated. Class worked with the school and each other to pull the funds to get her a new puppy Cocker Spaniel. We presented it to her when she returned and she was so happy she cried. Teacher here. I was witness to the death of one of my former students, pedestrian hit by a car right outside my apartment. This was pretty common knowledge to my students, and during a Kahoot game one of them put her name as their nickname. Couldn't help tearing up, and I let the waterworks start during my prep period. Our form tutor was a kindly middle-aged Welsh gal, pure as anything, just happy to be doing her job, but teenagers being who they are, it made her a joke to many. She announced to the class she'd be leaving at the end of the term or year etc, and they all cheered and whooped. She left the classroom in tears. Kids can be assholes. We had a substitute once, and one of the football jocks went behind her and pretended to hump her. She glared back at him and began bawling. Poor lady. Angry tears. Had a history teacher one year. Really good teacher. He had a teenage son who had committed suicide, and after he took some time off, he came back to work. Standard class clown kid started acting up in his class. Each asks him to go into the hallway so he can speak with him privately. We heard their exchange get a little heated, but this kid just cranked it to 11 and insinuated teacher's kid was right to kill themselves with a father like him. Heard that kid bounce off some lockers about a second after. Teacher came back into the room with angry tears and told one of us to call the school resource officer. It became a big hullabaloo and teacher ended up suspended for the rest of the year. At the time I thought it was crazy he'd shove that kid like that. 15 years later and some real world experience later, I'm surprised that's all he did. Multiple times. We were a terrible class. She was our 6th grade teacher. Our school had this odd system where you had a homeroom teacher for most of the day, but then rotated around to other teachers for just a few classes. Our homeroom teacher was also the music teacher, and for some reason during music class all hell would break loose. She went on vacation for a week and came back with a bad sunburn around the eyes, so we would only call her MRS, Raccoon. It caused her to get more tanning done. During one music class she really had to go to the washroom, so she left for about 4 seconds and a fight broke out between a boy and a girl. The girl took the boy's head and threw it through a snare drum. He got stuck in there. She came back to thinking he was dead. Eventually she had a mental breakdown mid-class and ran out into the hallway crying. The 7th grade teacher saw this and instead of consoling her walked in and just let us have it. I'll never forget that day. He said we were spoiled as shats for treating a teacher who only ever wanted to help us like trash. He screamed that if he had a teacher like her when he was a kid he would do everything he could to keep her. Yelled that if we kept acting this way we were in for a life of disappointment brought on by our own rampant incompetence. It worked. Some of us cried, but everyone felt horrible and we were all nice to her for the remaining year. I remember in high school getting a teacher fresh out of uni. He was the best, super passionate about teaching, and would often incorporate music and comedy into his teaching to make it more interesting. Almost everyone in the class loved him because of it. There were 3 footy players who would always play up in class though, and the teacher spent extra attention on them, trying to get them just as excited about learning as the rest of the class. But they were simply too cool to pay attention in class. One day they took it too far. I can't remember the exact details, but I do remember that one of the footy players threw a chair as a joke either at another student or at the teacher himself, and it just broke the poor guy. He lost his it at the unruly students, and you could see the pure frustration in his face. He just wanted to teach, but these few students were hellbent on ruining it for everyone. He ended up just leaving the classroom in tears, and everyone in the class quickly turned against the kids who threw the chair. I'm the teacher who cried, but I guess I can still share something lol. My class noticed one morning that I wasn't myself and one kid asked me during recess whether I was okay. Normally I wouldn't share about my personal life, but I told my student that my grandma had passed away that morning. At the end of the day before I dismissed the class, The class committee handed me a sympathy card with really sweet condolence messages from every student in my class. I couldn't keep it in and started bawling. In middle school science, I had a teacher who was always so sweet. She was an older woman, and she always made sure we had materials for her class, often at her own expense. I remember she went out and bought like 20 plastic pencil cases and filled them with pencils, rulers, erasers, everything we would need for the class. One day, some of the kids decided to throw a few of the pencil cases across the room. They snapped some of the rulers and just generally broke a lot of the things she provided for us while she stepped out for 5 minutes to talk to another teacher. When she came back, she started crying and I remember feeling so bad for her. She gave the class little pieces of candy after, apologizing for losing control and getting emotional. We were the ones who should have been apologetic. She was so sweet to us even though the class was full of demon children. Someone made the math teacher cry by saying math is the devil. Her license plate was mathfun, so you know she was serious about it. I had a French teacher once. We were her first class since becoming a teacher. Lovely woman, but many of us suspected she has mental health problems. Always very quiet and mousy, and she always came in looking a bit messy, i.e. hair not brushed and makeup a bit smudged. There were these two girls who would just torment her. They hid pickled muscles around the classroom and were just these loud obnoxious assholes. Long story short, turns out the teacher's mum had just died, and on top of the stress of managing a class with some real horrible kids, she had a nervous breakdown and never came back. About 2 years later, I was going to a concert and saw her begging for money outside a train station. Just felt so horrible seeing what she had been reduced to, all because of some nasty fuckling kids that just pushed her and pushed her. In 5th grade, my class was always extremely nasty to every substitute teacher that came in. They'd act out, doing and saying stupid shit, and though we never actually saw any of them cry, our regular teacher told us on multiple occasions that we'd left the substitute in tears after class was done. I hated every time there was a substitute because it would always become a richow. Also in middle school we had a teacher that started out extremely chill. She said she didn't believe in yelling at students. Unfortunately though, a lot of the same littlets from my 5th grade class were in this class too. Plus new ones. I don't remember what the cause was exactly, but one day she just snapped and screamed at us for a good 10 minutes. She definitely believed in yelling at students after that. It's one of the few things from middle school I remember clear as day. No, but once in chemistry class the teacher, Coach Bert, stopped writing on the board, looked straight ahead and mumbled, "I could probably blow my brains all over this chalkboard and you all wouldn't even notice." The only people that heard him were me and the girl I was talking to. I responded, "Coach, I think that's a dry erase board, nobody uses chalk anymore." And he laughed, which made me feel slightly less concerned. I'm a college teacher in the UK. Absolutely love my job. Love helping the kids I teach and love helping them reach their uni courses. Never really had many issues with most of my classes, but I had this one class that was real lazy. Never did their work etc. They got a real result back one lesson. Average mark was like 30%. I said something in passing and a student made a comment about how I shouldn't guilt trip them. I explained how I felt like I was working harder than they were and I felt like I cared more about their results than they did, despite they would be going to uni. At the time I was going through a breakup and was living in my car for a few days, and I cried then in front of that class. Awful moment, professionally speaking. In 5th grade, we had a psychotic substitute teacher, probably in his late 50s. At the beginning of class, everyone was goofing off and he immediately shut us down by screaming "shut up" at us, shaking furiously. We all stayed silent after that because he legit freaked us out. But we came to the conclusion that he was hearing voices in his head, because about 20 minutes into class, he stopped talking abruptly and screamed at us again at the top of his lungs that we would regret being so loud. But no one had uttered a ducking word. He then stomped over to the desk, violently swept everything off, muttering the entire time to himself, then went to the back of the room and turned all of the lights off. We were all terrified at this point. He silently paced around the back of the room for a while, then went back to the front and slapped the chalkboard. His next words were what I remember the most clearly. He was violently shaking as he yelled, I'm going to tell your teacher how horrible of a class you all are when she gets back. And I'll make sure she burns you up. To hell with all of you." He threw himself back into the teacher's chair and started sobbing. One of my classmates managed to sneak out and get the principal. He was escorted from the classroom a few minutes later, and we all had to individually go into the principal's office and recount what happened. Apparently he had just gotten a divorce and he had lost it. He was fired that same day. Honestly, I don't think we actually did anything to warrant his initial reaction. He just snapped. When I was in HS we were misbehaving as a whole group. Just making noise and not listening and messing around and finding just about everything that was happening far too funny. Nothing too major. A few of us got sent out to stand in the corridor until she got a handle on things. When she came out to speak to us, one dude was leaning up against the door frame with his hand, and upon realizing we couldn't contain our laughter at this point, she decided to leave us out there and stormed back into the class, slamming the door. It was at this point the dude screamed with the force of 1,000 suns. I hadn't heard anything quite like it. Teacher comes back out instantly, steam bellowing out of her ears ready to completely destroy our childhoods. She turned to the kid and noticed the end of his finger hanging off, instantly realizing she'd shut it in the door. Her mood changed just as quickly, and she just broke down into tears. I would have felt bad, but it just topped off the list of things I shouldn't have been laughing at already. Edit. Spelling and grammar. All boys school. Young, pretty female teacher. One of the boys belched loudly. She said, "That's disgusting." He replied, "Bend over and I'll show you disgusting." She cried. He got suspended, but should have been expelled. It was middle school band. About 70 kids with instruments, and about half of those kids would not stop playing them super obnoxiously. Props to the teacher for keeping it together as long as she did though. 7th grade English, we were still breaking down parts of speech. Our teacher, let's call her MRS, capital T, was trying extra hard to be happy and get our attention and asked one of the worst behaved kids for an example of a sentence so we could break it down as a class. He waited till the room was silent, looked her dead in the eyes and said, "MRS, T is a bad teacher." She put it up on the board and broke it down through tears. Still makes me mad over 15 years later. Yes, in year 5, 9-10, we had this small, pretty cool teacher take over our class because our usual teacher was out doing something. One day, we would not shut up. Something happened that got us kids all excited, and I was just giggling. Looked up to see the teacher just run out the class in floods of tears. I then realized just how little attention the class was given her and how much they cared, because it took several minutes for everyone to notice she was gone, then went right back to talking. I felt really bad for that teacher because she was the only teacher in our year who got no respect from the students. It wasn't my class but my twin brother's class when we were in grade 7. We went to a public school, which was full of delinquents, but his class was especially bad. They had a substitute teacher take over one of their classes for about a month, and one of the kids thought it would be hilarious if he pretended to be severely intellectually disabled. Looking back on it now, it was horrible, but at the time everyone thought it was hilarious. He would moan words, throw books, water, spit on the floor and dribble. The class played along with it, but they would all howl with laughter at him. The substitute kept saying things like he can't control it, stop bullying him. It got to a point where he was being especially bad with his disability and everyone in class kept laughing. She ended up crying in the middle of class and later quit after she found out he had been pretending the entire time. Yes, a class full of rowdy, obnoxious kids that wouldn't listen. Teacher wasn't slender and the class would always make snide underlying comments about it. She reached her breaking point one day and started slamming a book on a rowdy student's desk, screaming, "Get the duck out of my class," over and over. It was quite sad. It was her first year teaching and I think the pressure got to her. I don't know how it is in other countries, but in Germany we have a day where we go to some destination for a day of fun. Anyways, the class wanted to go to the zoo and the teacher was really invested in a trip to museum that had an exhibition about meteorites. Damn interesting for a bunch of middle school students, and she cried when we told her we didn't want to go. So we then went there to make her happy. Her breath stunk from meters away. We anonymously left a bottle of Listerine on her desk. We thought we were being kind. She thought it was a horrible prank. These days I can see her point. First year of an all-girls high school. Music teacher who always held out her hand when she said stop. Not that long after the Spice Girls released their song Stop, led to a classroom of 24 girls, standing on the tables reenacting the whole dance routine. Oh my, yes. Substitute came in and we just broke her so thoroughly, so completely. I felt awful, but she also wasn't equipped to deal with us. 13 years olds are the meanest people in the world. They terrify me to this day because 8th graders will make fun of you, but in an accurate way. I remember on my last day in English class in 5th grade our teacher cried because we were so awesome and she was going to miss us. Apparently she did this every year, but it was kind of sweet lol. First time. Early in my teaching career, I was hired in between the first and second semester to teach 2nd grade. When my second contract ended, I chose to leave. I insisted that I would be the one to tell my students so that they could respond to me, as I did not trust the school. About 1 week before the end of the semester I told them I would not be returning the following semester. Initially, all seemed well. Mildly surprised, my students asked a few questions, then seemed ready to complete the lesson. One student was silently but frantically trying to get my attention. She pointed to her classmate, whose head was bobbing slightly on her desk. Amanda, not her real name. Are you okay? She looked up, sobbing silently. I'm sure I looked shocked because I had not expected this, as I was teaching in a famously stoic culture. Kids will be kids. Though, my shock and her tears slowly registered throughout the class. She basically ran to my desk and threw herself into my arms. This is not an Anglo-based culture, and teachers are allowed to hug students but were more likely to rap their knuckles with a ruler. The homeroom and math teacher were both present, so I dropped my worries and just hugged her back. She sat in my lap, at the teacher's front desk and cried for several minutes, until the other students' antics to get my attention distracted her. I am sure I shed a few tears. She was a bright, thoughtful, caring student, and I will never forget her. Second time. An 18-year-old uni student from my class entered my office and proceeded to have nothing short of a complete tantrum and told me that I was ruining her college experience and her life because she was used to being number one. However, I was not picking her enough to give answers. I was not giving her enough opportunities to shine. And she did not understand my feedback, mainly why any of it was negative. She was clearly angry, frustrated and lost because she had always identified by being the best. We had a 40-minute discussion about why I had to pick others to give answers in class, why it was normal to not be the best at university, and specifics regarding a few mistakes she had made so that I could justify why she was not receiving the perfect scores she was accustomed to in high school. My officermate was shocked that I not only allowed her to speak to me like this but that I had talked her through the whole thing so that she left calmly if a bit shook. I think I was very angry, but I also kind of understood her frustration. So my anger was tempered with sadness. She lived for academic success and was a hard-working student. Sometimes, I scream into a pillow, and tears come out. I think that happened when I got home. 7 weeks later, at the end of term, I found a heart-shaped box with scarves, flowers, a mug, I drink coffee or tea daily, and a profuse and warm apology on my desk once all students had left the building. The student visited my office regularly for advice and encouragement until I left the country just over 1 year later. Most recently, after leaving a certain country, my former student contacted me online. I knew she wanted to tell me something that her culture frowned upon because she hinted at it. She told me that she hates her culture because it treats women badly, they have no freedom, and she is miserable. She hates the culture that forces this upon women, and she can't admit this. Saying she does not follow the accepted norms is cause for death. She desperately wants to leave, but she can't make that choice for herself. She wants to live a life most of us take for granted. She wants to make her own choices. Her longing makes me cry still. My own impotence in the face of such pain makes me cry. This still makes me rage. 9th grade history teacher. Never had him myself, but a bunch of friends did. Was a good guy, but his wife gave birth to triplets over summer break and his stress level and sleep deprivation was obvious even to a lot of us kids. One day a group of it popular girls called the school pretending to be his wife and said there had been a car accident involving his newborns. His classroom was next to mine at the time, so he came in a panic, to ask my teacher to watch his class before literally sprinting down the hall. IDK what happened, but he never came back. Those kids broke him. My 3rd grade teacher had left under family circumstances, probably death, and I didn't realize that at the time. I asked what she left for and she broke down crying. I felt like dog crap for the rest of the day for making the teacher cry. I still feel bad. Sorry Mrs. Moore. Edit. Hi, I'm gonna answer some questions. This happened in Rockland, CA, so no, I didn't go to any of you schools. To the person that asked if I had asked out in a certain way, here's your explanation. Mrs. Moore had taken about 3 days off, and the day before she came back I asked the principal why she was gone. He said that she had to leave because of family matters and she would tell us if she was ready. When she came back I slowly raised my hand and asked Mrs. Moore, "Why did you leave?" That's when she cried. I remember that day very vividly because that was the only time I saw a teacher cry so far. Also, she now has a son that's about 1 or 2 years old, so I'm happy for her. She was really nice, but I moved away a long time ago. Second edit. I've made it on some small YouTube channels with this comment, yay. It was the end of the day and a whole bunch of us 9-year-olds were getting ready to go home when this kid who was always trying to make trouble started arguing with the teacher about the next day's homework, and she made some comment about his mom and then he made a rude joke about the teacher's mom and she burst into tears and screamed her mom was dead. Then we sat in silence for like 5 minutes while the teacher cried. Edit. Also, that same teacher once came in crying in the morning, and when we asked what happened she said one of her past students died of leukemia. The worst thing was that we saw that girl like a week before while the class was taking a walk in the woods, and she and her mom mentioned how she was recovering and was feeling so much better. The whole class knew our teacher loves us so much. On her birthday, we decided to surprise her once she enters the classroom after the flag ceremony. We divided into 2 groups. Some of us are together with the teacher during flag ceremony and some are waiting for the flag ceremony to end and are trying to hide in certain places in the classroom. The teacher had no clue of what was actually happening, and when she arrived together with some of our classmates, we started singing happy birthday to her. She was so shocked you can clearly see her trying to hold her tears. It was the class' most successful birthday surprise. Edit. For those who are asking what a flag ceremony is, in our country, it is held every Monday at 6:30 in the morning. The whole school gathers in a field or gymnasium to honor our country and sing our national anthem while facing the flag, which will be raised by 3 Boy Scouts, and after that, is reciting the national pledges. It follows a long process, starts with praying, ends after announcements, if there's any, and lasts for at least 30 minutes. And also, thanks for the award, kind stranger, DD.